Well, hello, friends. So now that we've completed the installation of Android Studio in our previous lesson, now we'll be able to examine the interface of Android Studio. So I'm sure that you're ready, so let's get started. So after creating our first project, we encountered a screen like this. So at this point, I would like to remind you once again, after making sure that your project has been completely loaded in the build section, you should do the necessary action. So if your project has not been uploaded, you can wait for the project to be fully loaded without any further action. All right, so after making this reminder, now we can examine Android Studio's interface. So we can basically examine the interface in 4 parts. The first part is the part where we do the coding and make the necessary designs for our projects. Now you're going to see it better if we close the build window here. And if you notice, there are 2 tabs here. The first is the main activity.java, which we will use to write our Java code. And the second is the activity main.xml file that we can design for our projects. Now, while developing an Android application, we'll first create the design of the application that we'll do, and then we make the necessary coding for the design. Actually, this is the part where we will use as a basis, right? So for now, you just need to know this preliminary information. So after examining other parts of the interface, we will examine this part in detail. Now the section on the left over here is the section where the project files are located. If you see this part differently, you can click on the part, type Android above, and here you may have project instead of Android. You can select the Android option from the pop-up menu. So when we create a project in Android Studio also creates many different files related to our project for us. Thus, we have the opportunity to run our project on different platforms or share it with different people, publish our project. So if the project is selected instead of Android, we will be viewing all the project files that are and have been created here. Of course, this creates a complex view because we will not be able to use every file created. So for a simpler view, let's make sure that this Android option is selected. Now, when we examine the project directory here, a new folder has been created under a Java folder with the package name we determined while creating the project, right? And just below the package folder, the Java class, that is main activity, has been created. So while developing an Android application, we will make applications that will require more than one class. So this stage, the Java classes that we will create will appear here. And of course, we also mentioned the design file. So you might ask, where's the design file, right? Well, if you look a little below the project directory in here, you will see that a folder named res has been created. Now, it's actually the resource folder. It's a folder where design files, images, colors, text styles, and themes related to our project are going to be kept. Don't worry, we'll get to examine them in detail in our upcoming lessons. But I want to tell you that there is also the design file of our application in the layout folder here. So if you close the main activity.java and activity main.xml file, just by closing or pressing the X icon right next to the tabs here, you can open them again from the project directory. So if you double click on these files right here in the project panel, you can open them again. We can also shrink and expand the part reserved for the project directory. For this, you can position your mouse on the line between the project panel and the main panel. Now, if you notice that the cursor changes, so you can drag it left or right to expand or collapse the project panel. You can also completely close and then open your project panel. For that, you can minimize, see the minimize icon here. And if you want to open the project panel again, you can click on the project tab here. All right, so there's the project panel. That's how it works. Now let's have a look at the toolbar window at the top of the interface. Of course, there are many tabs up in here. From the File tab, there's a Help tab, and you see that in many interfaces. So first, let's have a look at the File tab. As you can see, there are many features in here. We're mainly going to examine the features that we're going to be using during the course. We'll examine some of the other features as needed. But first, you can create a new project by using the New and New Project options here. And then by using the Open button, you can open a project that you have created and saved previously. You can also close your open project by using the Close Project option. And there is a settings option here to make some necessary settings for Android Studio. So my friends who are using a Mac can click on Android Studio tab to the left of the File tab and select Preferences from the pop-up menu. So why don't we open up the settings screen now, and you can search the feature that you want right here in the search bar. For example, the size of the text in the area that we will be coding, I think it's quite small. So I'm just going to increase the size of the font, and that way you'll be able to see it better. All right, maybe me. So when I write font, the related features come up, right? So in order to change the required properties, I'll first delete the font text from the search bar, and then the relevant fields become active. So you can change the font in the font section here. You can also increase the size of text from the size option just below. I'm going to make it 18. And as you see, the text becomes much more legible. Now, naturally, you don't have to do this step, but I'm going to do it this way so that you can see it better. All right, so let's take a look at another feature. So I'll type in theme in the search bar. So by using this feature, you can change the interface to dark mode or light mode. Okay, so let's finally examine the SDK section and finish the settings section. So I'll write SDK into the search bar. And here you can see the SDK location. There are also 3 tabs just below. The first is SDK platforms. Now, if there was any sort of a problem during your installation, well, we could always download the SDK that we need from here. As you can see, here's a statement that it is indeed installed. Now, if you also write another statement, you should check the checkbox here and press the Apply button here. And that way you will reinstall SDK. So I'll open up the second tab, the SDK Tools tab. And what you're looking at is there are 4 tools installed. If any one of them is missing, that is, if it doesn't happen to be installed, you should check the checkbox here and press the Apply button. So we can also install Google Play services and USB driver tools here. That way you can test your projects on your personal Android device instead of testing them on the emulator. So you can also install these tools if you want. So for this, I'll tick the checkboxes here and press the Apply button. So when you click on the OK button, the necessary installation processes begin. And as you can see, my friends, if you encounter any errors during the installation process, if the necessary tools are not installed properly, whatever, you can always use this settings section to complete your installation. All right, so now the download process is over, and I'll press the Finish button. And yeah, so that's what you can do in the Settings section. Now let's have a look at the other tabs that we're going to be using. So I want to show you the View tab. You can use this tab to toggle many views of the interface. For example, using the Tool window, it's the tab right here. We can open and close the tools on the edges of the interface. And again, from the Appearance section here, you can select which tools you want to appear in the interface. For example, if we select the toolbar from here, the icons for saving the project, opening an existing project, or reloading the project appear in the interface. So I'm going to undo this because that finishes what's under the View tab. So we're not going to really use the other tabs very much, but we will use the tabs that need to be used in our progressing lessons. So that's why I want to show you what's under the Build tab here. So sometimes after the project has been created, a number of errors can occur. So in this case, you might need to rebuild your project. So to rebuild a project, you can use the Rebuild Project tab here. You can rebuild your project from here. And but don't worry, I'm going to explain this section in the tutorial where we will install the emulator. All right. So don't get too carried away. So why don't we go ahead and examine a little bit of the design area. So for this, I want to open the activity main.xml file. So let's just close the project panel, and you'll be able to see it more easily. All right, that's better. So you can also zoom in on the design area just by pressing the plus icon here. All right. So now we are focusing on the design area. And again, the design area incorporates 4 different sections. The first is the palette section on the upper left over here. And these are the components that we will use while we are designing. For example, we'll access many components such as buttons, text views where we can write text, and image view components where we can add images. We'll be able to see their use in detail, of course, in the next lessons. I'm just giving you a general overview at the moment. So we can drag and drop any of these components here into the design area. Notice that the design area looks like a phone screen. In fact, if you click on the eye icon here and select the Show System UI option, you'll get a real Android phone screen. Right, so that's what you could do in the design area. Let's activate the Show System UI option again. So in previous versions of Android Studio, Show Layout Decoration was used instead of Show System UI. So hopefully that's not too confusing, but now you know. And that's how you make your designs better. So let's just delete the text view component where Hello World is written. And to do that, just click on the component, hit delete, right? And now to undo this, I can press Control or Command Z for Mac from the keyboard. I'll zoom in a little bit. And another way to delete any component, after selecting the component, you can right-click with your mouse, and then from the options that appear, select the Delete option. And to undo this, I'll press Control or Command Z for Mac from the keyboard. Now, finally, you can select and delete the component from the Component Tree section. So that's the second part of the design area. Again, to add components to the design area, you can drag and drop the component you select from the palette section into the component tree section. And component tree is a section where the components that we use in the design area are going to be located. So we can choose the components from the design area, or we can select them from the component tree and change any properties that we want to change. We could change the properties of components in the attributes section as well, located on the far right. Now, in order to change any property of a component, for example, the text size or color, after selecting the component from the design area or the component tree, we can find the feature that we want in the attribute section and make those changes happen. And again, not to worry, we'll do all of these procedures in detail later on. But I do want to draw your attention to this. Notice that the design file is actually a .xml file. So in other words, XML code is actually created for all the components that we're going to be using while designing, as well as the properties of these components. For example, to add a button to the design area, we can either drag and drop the button from the palette or create it by typing XML code. And for this, we can open the split or code tabs in the upper right corner. And if we open the code section, we will only see the section where XML codes are written. If we open the split section, we can see both XML and design. Now you can also open the component tree and palette if you want. If you open the design tab, you can only see the design area. Now pay attention to this. The XML code of the button that we created, do you see how it's created automatically? So in our next lessons, we will learn to create components using XML code. All right. So my friends, the interface of Android Studio tour is now complete. Now I've shown you the sections that we'll use most frequently in the upcoming lessons. So we're going to learn these 3 sections in pretty good detail. But before we end here, I should also mention that since Android Studio is constantly improving yourself, you may see some differences in the interfaces in our next lessons. For example, the code and design section here was at the bottom left in previous versions, and this split option wasn't even available. So you may see slight differences in the interface like this. Not a big deal. If there is an update about coding, we will update our related course as soon as we can. All right. So now we can end our lesson, and I want to see in the next lesson where we're going to create an emulator, or what's often called an Android virtual device. So we'll take a short break here, and I want to see you in the next lesson.